Let me start with a question that might make you uncomfortable, but that's where growth lives. If someone watched your daily habits for 7 days, would they be able to predict your future? Think about that. Because your future is not built by your intentions, it's built by your routines. And today I want to talk to you about the one thing that separates average from exceptional, wishers from winners, talkers from builders. Discipline. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is not suffering. Discipline is not doing what you hate. Discipline is doing what you said you were going to do long after the feeling is gone. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your self-respect goes up. Every time you break one, it goes down. That's why discipline is the highest form of self-respect. See, motivation is emotional. Discipline is spiritual. Motivation shows up when life is easy. Discipline shows up when life is hard. Motivation says, I feel like it. Discipline says, I committed to it. And commitment is the language of winners. You don't become confident by yelling affirmations in the mirror. You become confident by doing hard things consistently and proving to yourself that you can be trusted. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they lack structure. They don't lack dreams. They lack systems. Let me say that again. You don't need more motivation. You need more discipline. Because discipline creates momentum, momentum creates confidence, and confidence creates results. When you wake up early instead of hitting snooze, you're not just waking up, you're voting for the person you want to become. Here's a powerful truth. Your results are not a reflection of your potential. They are a reflection of your standards. And disciplined people have higher standards. They don't ask, how do I feel today? They ask, what does my future require of me today? They understand that comfort is expensive and the bill always comes due with interest. Discipline is how you say no to short-term pleasure so you can say yes to long-term freedom. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is having the discipline to do what matters. Anyone can relax, anyone can quit, anyone can make excuses. But it takes a high level of self-respect to say, I will not betray my future for my comfort. And let me challenge you with this. The version of you that you admire, the stronger, wealthier, more confident you is already watching your decisions. Every disciplined action is a message you send to that future version saying, I'm coming to get you. And every undisciplined action is a delay. Most people think self-respect comes from confidence, titles, or how others see you, but real self-respect is built in private. It is built in the quiet moments when no one is watching and no one is applauding. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. The way you treat your promises to yourself determines the level of respect you have for yourself. Every time you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, you teach your mind that your words don't matter. Over time, that creates internal doubt. But every time you do what you said you would do, especially when it's hard, you send a powerful message to yourself that you are reliable. And reliability is the foundation of self-respect. Let me ask you something that cuts deep. If you were an employee in your own life, would you trust you? Would you promote you? Would you even keep you? Most people don't lack ability. They lack credibility with themselves. They talk big, plan big, dream big, but their execution is small. Discipline fixes that gap. Discipline is how you turn intention into identity. When your actions line up with your words, you stop second guessing yourself. You stop needing external validation because you've already proven something to the most important person in your life. Here's the truth. Most people never ear. Confidence is not a personality trait, it's a byproduct. Confidence is the residue left behind when you consistently keep promises to yourself. You don't wake up one day and suddenly believe in yourself. You earn belief through evidence. Discipline creates evidence. When you wake up early, even though you don't feel like it, when you finish the task you wanted to quit, when you choose progress over comfort, you are stacking proof. That proof becomes certainty. And certainty changes the way you speak, the way you walk, and the way you make decisions. Think about this. Your mind is always watching your behavior. It is constantly asking, can I trust you? Every disciplined action answers that question with a yes. Every excuse answers it with a no. And your mind keeps score. That's why people who constantly break promises to themselves struggle with self-doubt, procrastination, and fear. They don't believe in themselves because they've trained themselves not to. Discipline is how you retrain your mind. It's how you rebuild internal trust, one decision at a time. Most people are waiting for discipline to feel easy before they practice it. That's backwards. Discipline is not supposed to feel easy. It's supposed to feel necessary. It's not about perfection. It's about integrity. Integrity is when what you say and what you do are aligned, and alignment creates power. When you are disciplined, your words carry weight. When you say you're going to do something, you don't hope, you know. That certainty becomes magnetic. People respect disciplined individuals because discipline produces consistency, and consistency produces results. Here's a hook you need to hear clearly. Every undisciplined decision is a vote against your future self, and every disciplined decision is a vote in their favor. You are always choosing which version of yourself you are feeding. The weak version thrives on excuses. The strong version thrives on structure. Discipline is not about being harsh with yourself. It's about honoring yourself. It's saying, my future matters too much for me to keep lying to myself. When you develop discipline, something powerful happens. You stop negotiating with your lower self. You stop asking, do I feel like it? And start asking, what did I commit to? That shift changes everything. You no longer rely on emotion, you rely on standards. And standards are what separate leaders from followers. Discipline is the evidence that you respect your time, your potential, and your purpose enough to show up even when it's uncomfortable. This is why discipline is the highest form of self-respect, because it proves that your word has value, your goals have weight, and your future deserves effort. When you keep promises to yourself, you don't just build habits, you build identity. You become the kind of person who can be trusted. And once you trust yourself, the world starts to respond differently to you. Most people are waiting to feel motivated before they take action, and that waiting is quietly destroying their potential. Motivation is emotional, and emotions are unstable. They rise in the morning and disappear by afternoon. If your progress depends on how you feel, then your progress will always be inconsistent. Discipline, on the other hand, does not ask how you feel. Discipline asks one question only: what is required right now? That is why discipline outlives motivation. Motivation may start the race, but discipline is the only thing that finishes it. Here's a hard truth that most people avoid. Motivation is a luxury, not a strategy. It shows up when conditions are favorable, when energy is high, when life is comfortable. But life does not reward people who only perform under perfect conditions. Life rewards those who can execute under pressure, fatigue, and uncertainty. Discipline is what allows you to move forward when motivation disappears. It becomes your internal operating system. You don't wake up and negotiate with your feelings, you follow a process. And processes outperform emotions every single time. Think about how dangerous it is to depend on motivation. Motivation is reactive. It needs a trigger, a video, a speech, a quote, a burst of excitement. But what happens when the video ends? What happens when the music stops? What happens when no one is cheering? That's when most people quit. Discipline doesn't require external stimulation. It runs quietly in the background, pushing you forward even in silence. That's why disciplined people look unstoppable. They don't need hype to move. They move because movement is who they are. Here's a hook you need to sit with. Winners don't feel like it either. They just do it anyway. The difference between successful people and everyone else is not desire, it's decision. Discipline is a decision you make once and honor daily. Motivation asks to be renewed. Discipline asks to be respected. Once discipline is in place, you don't need to convince yourself anymore. The work becomes non-negotiable, like breathing or showing up on time. That's power. Motivation fades because it is tied to outcome. Discipline lasts because it is tied to identity. When you say, I work out when I'm motivated, you're building a fragile system. But when you say, I am the kind of person who trains daily, you create stability. Identity-based discipline removes emotional debate. You stop asking whether you should do the work and start asking how well you can do it. That shift eliminates procrastination, because procrastination feeds on uncertainty and discipline removes uncertainty. Most people underestimate how exhausting motivation really is. Constantly trying to hype yourself up drains mental energy. Discipline conserves energy because it removes choice. When there is no decision to make, there is no friction. You simply execute. That's why discipline creates consistency, and consistency creates momentum. And once momentum is built, progress becomes inevitable. You don't need to push as hard. The system carries you forward. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Relying on motivation is a form of self-betrayal. It gives you permission to quit when things get hard. Discipline removes that permission. It says we finish what we start. And finishing builds pride. Pride builds confidence. Confidence builds courage. All of that starts with discipline, not motivation. Motivation feels good, but discipline builds strength. Motivation excites you. Discipline transforms you. When discipline replaces motivation, something powerful happens. You stop being controlled by mood, weather, or circumstances. You become internally driven. You move on days you're tired, days you're discouraged, days you're uncertain. And those are the days that matter most, because those are the days when everyone else stops. Discipline gives you an unfair advantage. While others wait to feel ready, you're already moving. While others need inspiration, you rely on structure. That is why discipline is permanent. Feelings come and go, but discipline keeps producing results long after motivation fades. Most people are looking for a breakthrough moment, something big and dramatic that will suddenly change their lives, but success rarely works that way. Life is shaped quietly through repeated actions that seem small in the moment. Every habit you practice is a vote. Every decision you make is casting a ballot for the future version of you. And whether you realize it or not, you are voting every single day. The problem is that most people don't understand what they're voting for until the results show up. And by then, the pattern is already set. Here's a hook that hits hard. Your future is being built in the ordinary moments you're ignoring. The way you start your morning, how you manage your time, what you do when no one is watching, those moments compound. One disciplined action doesn't change your life, but repeated daily, it creates momentum. Just like enter. In a bank account, habits grow quietly, then suddenly. People call it overnight success, but it's really the accumulation of thousands of small, disciplined choices made consistently. Most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year. That's why they quit too early. They expect instant results from small actions and give up when they don't see immediate change. But growth doesn't announce itself, it reveals itself. The person who reads 10 pages a day doesn't feel smarter tomorrow, but a year later, they are operating on a completely different level. The person who saves a small amount consistently doesn't feel wealthy in a month, but over time, financial stability becomes inevitable. Your habits are shaping your identity whether you acknowledge it or not. When you repeatedly choose discipline, you reinforce the belief that you are a disciplined person. When you repeatedly choose excuses, you reinforce the opposite. Identity is not built by what you claim, it's built by what you repeat. That's why small habits are so powerful. They don't just change what you do, they change who you believe you are. And once identity shifts, behavior follows effortlessly. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You are not stuck because of one bad decision, you are stuck because of a pattern. Patterns are created through repetition, and repetition is controlled by daily choices. That means your freedom is closer than you think. You don't need a miracle, you need consistency. You don't need a new life. You need new habits practiced long enough to compound. Discipline in small things creates trust with yourself, and that trust fuels bigger commitments. Most people wait for massive motivation to take massive action, but disciplined people master the small actions first. They understand that small actions done daily beat intense actions done occasionally. Skipping one workout doesn't destroy your health, but skipping consistently does. Eating one healthy meal doesn't transform your body, but doing it repeatedly does. The direction matters more than the speed. As long as your daily habits are pointing you forward, progress is guaranteed. Here's another hook. Your life today is the receipt of your past habits. If you don't like what you see, you don't need to panic. You need to change what you're practicing. Discipline gives you the power to rewrite the future by changing the present. Each day becomes an opportunity to cast a better vote. And the best part is that no one else needs to approve it. You don't need permission to be disciplined. When you commit to daily discipline, you stop chasing outcomes and start building systems. Systems remove guesswork. Systems create reliability. And reliability compounds into excellence. The disciplined person doesn't rely on inspiration, they rely on rhythm. That rhythm, repeated over time, creates unstoppable momentum. And while others are searching for shortcuts, disciplined individuals are quietly stacking habits that make success unavoidable. Most people think freedom means doing whatever they want, whenever they want. But that definition of freedom is the fastest way to lose control of your life. Real freedom is not the absence of rules, it is the presence of structure that works in your favor. Without structure, your days get decided by distractions, your energy gets stolen by chaos, and your potential gets buried under randomness. Discipline is what installs structure, and structure is what creates true freedom. Here's a hook you need to hear clearly. The more unstructured your life is, the more controlled you actually are. You become controlled by notifications, moods, interruptions, and other people's priorities. You think you're free because no one is telling you what to do, but in reality, everything is telling you what to do. Discipline flips that equation. It allows you to decide in advance how your time, energy, and focus will be used. That decision-making power is freedom. Structure doesn't limit creativity, it protects it. When your basic disciplines are in place, when you know when you wake up, when you work, when you rest, you remove mental clutter. Your brain no longer wastes energy on constant decisions. That mental space becomes available for high-level thinking, creativity, and execution. That's why the most successful people in the world operate with strict routines, not because they lack freedom, but because they value it too much to leave it to chance. Most people are exhausted not because they're doing too much, but because they're doing too much of the wrong things. A lack of structure forces you to react instead of respond. You spend your day putting out fires instead of building something meaningful. Discipline creates order. Order creates efficiency. Efficiency creates margin. And margin is where freedom lives. When your life is structured, you gain time, energy, and clarity, 3 resources. Most people are desperate for, here's another hook that challenges the ego. Chaos feels exciting, but it's expensive. It costs you focus. It costs you peace. It costs you progress. Discipline may feel boring at first, but boring done consistently produces extraordinary results. Structure turns effort into leverage. Instead of pushing harder, you start moving smarter. Instead of being busy, you become effective. That shift is the beginning of freedom. Think about financial freedom for a moment. It doesn't come from spending without limits. It comes from budgeting and investing with discipline. Physical freedom doesn't come from eating whatever you want. It comes from structured training and nutrition. Time freedom doesn't come from saying yes to everything. It comes from disciplined boundaries. In every area of life, the same principle applies. Discipline creates structure, and structure creates freedom. Most people resist structure because they associate it with control imposed by others. But self-imposed structure is empowerment. When you design your own disciplines, you are choosing your future instead of reacting to it. You stop living in survival mode and start operating in tension. Discipline allows you to front-load effort so you can back-end freedom. You work hard now so life becomes easier later, not harder. Here's a truth that separates leaders from followers. Disciplined people don't need to escape their lives. Undisciplined people do. When your life lacks structure, you constantly look for distractions, entertainment, and relief. When your life is disciplined, your life becomes something you don't need to run from. Structure gives you pride in your days. It creates momentum that carries you forward even when motivation is low. When discipline becomes your lifestyle, freedom stops being a dream and starts being a byproduct. You gain control over your schedule instead of your schedule controlling you. You gain control over your energy instead of being drained by chaos. And that control doesn't make life smaller, it makes it bigger. Discipline doesn't cage you, it positions you. And from that position, freedom becomes inevitable. Most people don't realize that comfort is not neutral. Comfort is persuasive. It whispers instead of shouts, and that's why it's so dangerous. It doesn't tell you to quit outright. It tells you to delay. It tells you there's always tomorrow, that rest is deserved, that pushing yourself can wait, and slowly, quietly, comfort begins to negotiate away your potential. Growth never announces itself loudly, but neither does decline. Both happen daily, and the direction is determined by what you choose. When comfort and commitment collide, here's a hook that hits hard. Comfort feels like relief, but it charges interest. Every time you choose comfort over discipline, the cost doesn't disappear, it compounds. You pay for it later with regret, lost confidence, and unrealized potential. Comfort makes today easier and tomorrow row harder. Discipline does the opposite. Discipline makes today harder so tomorrow can be free. That trade-off is unavoidable. The only question is when you're willing to pay the price. Comfort convinces you that avoiding discomfort is self-care. But real self-care is building a life you don't need to escape from. Growth requires tension. Muscles don't grow without resistance. Character doesn't grow without pressure. Skill doesn't grow without repetition under discomfort. When you remove discomfort from your life, you don't remove pain, you postpone it. Discipline teaches you to choose productive discomfort now, so you can avoid destructive discomfort later. Most people are not afraid of failure. They're afraid of discomfort. They avoid hard conversations, challenging routines, and unfamiliar environments because comfort feels safe. But comfort is a false sense of security. It keeps you in familiar patterns that slowly shrink your world. Discipline expands your world by forcing you to stretch. Every disciplined action is a signal that you are willing to be uncomfortable for something greater. That willingness is the gateway to growth. Here's another hook. The life you want is on the other side of the comfort you're protecting. The habits that will transform you are the ones you resist the most. Waking up early, staying consistent, doing the work when it's boring. These actions don't feel exciting, but they create momentum. Comfort keeps you reactive. Discipline makes you proactive. And proactive people shape their futures instead of explaining why they don't have one. Comfort feeds excuses, and excuses feed stagnation. Discipline starves excuses. When discipline becomes your standard, comfort loses its authority over you. You stop asking what feels good and start asking what moves you forward. That shift is subtle but powerful. It changes how you respond to stress, how you manage time, and how you see obstacles. Challenges stop feeling like threats and start feeling like opportunities to grow stronger. Most people underestimate how quickly comfort can become a habit. Once your brain learns that avoidance is an option, it will offer that option every time things get difficult. Discipline retrains your brain. It teaches you that discomfort is not a stop sign, it's a signal that growth is happening. Over time, what once felt uncomfortable becomes normal, and what once felt impossible becomes routine. That's how discipline rewires your capacity. Here's a reality check. Comfort has never built a legacy. Every meaningful achievement in history required sacrifice. The people we admire didn't live easier lives, they lived more intentional ones. They understood that temporary sacrifice creates permanent strength. Discipline is how you choose sacrifice with purpose instead of suffering without progress. It allows you to endure discomfort that leads somewhere. When you consistently choose discipline over comfort, something shifts internally. You stop fearing hard work because you trust yourself to handle it. That trust builds confidence. That confidence builds resilience, and resilience makes you unstoppable. Comfort weakens over time, but discipline strengthens over time. And every time you choose discipline, you reclaim a piece of your future that comfort was trying to steal. Most people think their problem is lack of opportunity, lack of resources, or lack of support. But the real issue is much simpler and much harder to face. Their standards are too low. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your standards. Goals are what you want. Standards are what you tolerate. And what you tolerate becomes your lifestyle. The moment you understand this, you stop trying to feel better and start requiring better from yourself. Here's a hook that challenges comfort. Excuses sound reasonable, but they are expensive. Every excuse lowers your standards just enough to justify staying the same. Excuses don't remove obstacles. They remove responsibility. And the moment responsibility disappears, progress stops. Discipline begins when excuses end. It begins when you decide that certain behaviors are no longer acceptable regardless of how you feel or what's happening around you. Raising your standards is not about becoming harsh or unrealistic. It's about becoming honest. It's about telling yourself the truth without decoration. High standards mean you don't allow temporary emotions to override long-term commitments. You don't negotiate with weakness. You don't romanticize procrastination. You don't reward inconsistency. You understand that every excuse you accept today becomes a limitation you live with tomorrow. Most people spend their energy explaining why they can't instead of building reasons why they must. Excuses protect the ego in the short term, but they sabotage the future. Discipline removes the need for excuses by creating rules you live by. When standards are clear, decisions become simple. You no longer debate whether to do the work a standard is already decided. That clarity is powerful. It eliminates hesitation, procrastination, and self-betrayal. Here's another hook. Your life will never outperform the standards you enforce. If your standard allows quitting, you will quit. If your standard allows inconsistency, you will stay inconsistent. If your standard allows comfort to override commitment, comfort will always win. But when your standard is execution, effort, and integrity, your behavior aligns automatically. Discipline is not about intensity, it's about consistency enforced by standards. Excuses often sound intelligent. They use logic, circumstances, and past experiences to justify inaction. Discipline doesn't argue with excuses, it ignores them. It understands that excuses are infinite, but time is not. Every day you spend explaining is a day you're not building. Raising your standards means deciding that explanations are no longer impressive. Most people wait for confidence before they raise their standards. Disciplined people raise their standards and let confidence catch up. Confidence is built through evidence, and evidence is built through action. When you stop making excuses and start keeping standards, you generate proof that you are capable. That proof changes how you see yourself. And once your self-image changes, your behavior follows naturally. Here's the uncomfortable truth. No one is coming to rescue you from your excuses. No one is going to lower the price of discipline for you. If you want a different life, you must demand more from yourself than your circumstances demand from you. That demand is not pressure, it's respect. It's saying your future deserves a higher level of commitment than your past required. When you raise your standards, excuses lose their power. They still show up, but they no longer get a vote. Discipline becomes your filter. It decides what you do, what you tolerate, and what you walk away from. And as your standards rise, so does your life, quietly, consistently, and inevitably. So here's how we close this. If you want to change your life, stop negotiating with yourself, set the standard, keep the promise, do the work, especially when no one is watching. Because discipline is not about being perfect, it's about being consistent. And consistency over time turns ordinary people into extraordinary leaders.